Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. Today is going to be one of those nice overlaps between my work in obesity medicine and my work with physicians, particularly my group of you lovely humans who, like myself, struggle with lack of boundaries, perfectionism, people pleasing, and a little bit of self-worth issues going on. I say a little bit, I mean a lot. Move with me. It just, doesn't feel great to point that out, that many of us struggle with our sense of self-worth. So let's get into it today. I was talking about this recently on another physician's podcast, Dr. Rashmi Schramm, her wonderful podcast, Inner Peace and Power. And we were talking about this overlap between the idea of the bliss point and our experience as physicians, particularly as employed physicians, and kind of the struggle for self-worth. And so I'm going to share a story with you and we'll dive a little deeper into it. I am going to put the link to that episode of her podcast in the show notes. So I encourage you to go listen to that because, of course, we had a wonderful conversation. She's a delightful human being. She's an amazing coach and meditation teacher and does all sorts of crazy, awesome things. So definitely go check out her podcast as well. But I'm going to share my story knowing that this is something that resonates with those of you who I know are listening. Of course, there are many of you that I don't know who are listening, but because I get to hear from so many of you that have worked with me or interacted with me in some way and let me know kind of what the podcast means to you, I know that this story will hit home. So when I finished residency, I did a locums year, basically covering for some of my faculty and some of the older physicians who were in the HMO where I had done my training. And ultimately, I accepted a permanent position after that. And I had lovely people around me who were very smart, many of them who had spent, their entire career at that same setting, had lots of amazing skills. We had some faculty members who were HIV specialists, some who were women's health specialists, many who were doing full spectrum family practice, particularly in the faculty where they were doing inpatient medicine, they were doing obstetrics, right? Lots of procedures, right? Really the full breadth of what family medicine could offer, which is fairly limited in a city setting. I know that for those of you who might be in rural settings, much of family medicine ends up being that full spectrum practice. But in a city, generally, you have to be part of a faculty to do that. And I saw these amazing physicians and I wanted to be like them. So I kept adding skills to my own, toolbox, if you will. I added colposcopy skills, which I didn't get enough training as a resident, but I became competent. I, went and got additional training, right, and started to introduce that into my practice. I continued obstetrics after residency for many, many years, waking up at all odd hours, of course, to deliver babies. I provided as much full spectrum care as I could. And of course, that intersected with having a family of my own and, raising tiny humans and breastfeeding them and all that challenge, right? But I really was trying to always up level my skills and what I could offer to my patients. And I look back at that time and I remember I would add in something else, some new skill, some new service basically that I could offer my patients. And what that meant was that I was often getting referrals from other doctors, right? I would be adding procedures for their patients that those physicians didn't do, or I would be managing their pregnant patients and doing their deliveries. And part of me always was waiting for some kind of compensation, not monetary compensation, right? But some kind of recognition. Okay, you are an amazing physician. You're doing all of these services. We're going to peel back your panel a little bit. We're going to give you more time. We're going to give you more support. Some kind of recognition that I was doing an amazing job, right? That my skill sets, right, were up leveled. And I don't know, this sounds really weird to talk about out loud. And of course, there's ego crap in here, right? But I was expecting some kind of recognition, validation that I was doing a great job. And I don't think I'm surprising anybody when I say I did not feel like I was receiving that recognition. I was working really hard. My patients were generally really happy, except when they were complaining to me that they couldn't come in to see me because my schedule was all booked up with, prenatal care and colposcopy and some of these procedures that I was doing, right? Or I got called out to a delivery, right? And their appointments got canceled. Patients, of course, hate that. But it seemed like the more and more I added, the harder and harder I was working. And apart from my patients being happy, mostly, uh, I wasn't receiving any real recognition. And I kept being hungry for it. And I can look back and I can see, well, that makes total sense, Megan, because, you were brought up in, socialization that taught you to seek external validation, and you were pretty good at that. And then you went to medical school and you were dependent on external validation. And then that continued in residency. So no wonder you were continuously waiting for someone to say you've done enough, you're good enough, you're great, you're wonderful. I was waiting for that and kind of expecting that that would mean that I got to dial it down somehow, right? That I got the ability to do less, to not necessarily be paid more, right? But just to feel validated, right? That I was doing a good job. And it never really felt that way. There were always more demands. There was always feedback that, well, your patients are kind of frustrated that they can't get in to see you, as though that was my fault, right? There were patients trying to get on my panel and not taking no for an answer when I said, no, I'm over full, right? There was a lot of this in the churn of systems. And I don't think I need to explain to anybody what working in a big system is like. If you've never worked in a big system as a physician, lucky you, don't try. But most of us here know what it's like to work in a big system and to feel faceless, nameless, valueless. I share this story, and we're going to talk about how it relates to this concept called Bliss Point, because this happens over and over and over again to so many women physicians in particular. It's not exclusive, of course, to women physicians, and gender is not fully at play here, but it does play in a little bit, at least for most people. And our system of training reinforces in us over and over and over again that we are dependent on others for evaluation of our work. And therefore, it feels like of our worth, right? Our work and our worth, right? We throw that out into the world where physicians and healthcare systems and appointments are all being graded constantly, rated, reviewed, right? All the Press Ganey surveys, all the customer satisfaction surveys that have been part of the commodity of healthcare. Oh my goodness, people, like, no wonder so many of us walk around feeling like crap inside, right? I'll try not to get spicy with my language in case we've got little ones in the car, but you can fill in your own words right there. So let me stop the story there. And I'll just share that my journey towards feeling more self-worth has required a lot of inner work because, of course, feeling validated doesn't come from outside. It has to come from inside. Not to say that I can't receive other people's gratitude. I can't receive other people's praise. Of course, I can receive those. But I have to decide that I feel worthy inside for me to feel worthy as an emotion, right? To feel validated as an emotion. Okay, I won't get caught up on that. So let me talk about Bliss Point. So the food industry, another problematic industry, which we all interact with, has created what they call the Bliss Point. And they create processed foods that are designed specifically to hit our bliss point. What is the bliss point? The bliss point is supposed to be this magical space where you're enjoying the food enough that you will keep eating it, but you're not going to feel fully satisfied enough to stop, right? So relying on our normal human desire for more sugar, for more fat, for more salt, right? These really wonderful flavors that human bodies and other animals are designed to seek more of, because that helps to ensure that we get the minerals that we need from the salt, the fat that we need for part of our energy stores and cell metabolism, right? The sugar that is a great source of energy, right? And really necessary, in some amount to fuel our bodies, right? When they maximize the interaction of those three components so that we keep eating, but we don't feel full enough to stop eating, they maximize their profits, right? If they design a chip that is so tasty that I'm not going to feel full and uncomfortable from continuing to eat it, and I'm going to eat all of the bag, most of the bag, half of the bag, right? Way more than a quote unquote single portion, then they have increased their profits, because if I get halfway through a bag or all the way through a bag in one go, well, I'm going to have to buy a lot of chips to be able to, hit that spot over and over again, right? So they are looking at sort of our normal human conditioning to be really interested, right? We get dopamine from these really concentrated pleasures that are hardwired into us. And they have us coming back for more, right? You don't really fill up your stomach very much to a point of feeling full usually, especially if you're used to doing it over and over again. If you plow your way through a bag of potato chips, right? There's not sort of the fiber water density that helps you to feel full. Of course, that's not the only thing that goes into fullness. But I talk about this a lot with my patients who are working on weight management, because if we understand that the food industry has specifically created this bliss point to keep you eating, then we take a little bit of the shame and the broken feeling that we have when we overeat in that way away, right? If people struggle with binge eating disorders specifically, or they had periodic binge eating episodes or overeating episodes where they're frequently, or at least occasionally, eating way more than they know is good for them, way more than they're hungry for physiologically. Maybe they're holding it in all day and sort of, eating right. And then at the end of the day, they're like overeating for a variety of reasons. It's really important to understand the role of the food industry in having created something like the Bliss Point, right? Because you're not broken if that's your behavior. Unfortunately, you're the one who has to help make changes, right? But the food industry is absolutely creating these foods so that we keep eating them, right? Again, it's their profit margin. So how does this relate to this issue of worth and validation? All right, my friends, saddle up for this one. For those of us who have worked in a system, right? We've been employed. I don't think that this is intentional the way that Bliss Point is intentional, but I want you to see if this resonates with you, and I imagine that it will with many. When our employers praise us or laud our behaviors enough to keep us having high patient satisfaction scores, to keep us, working really hard, always trying to cram in extra things, whether that's, preventative little things that are added on, or, coding at a high level, right? And we've got to manage more things, right? When they are giving us just enough validation that we're doing a good job, they are feeding that part of us that is has been dependent on praise, right? Like you needed to get good scores, good grades. You needed to get good feedback from your teachers and your mentors and your advisors as a medical student, as a resident, in order to pass, right? So your, I don't want to say your human existence, right? But your perpetuation along the path to become a physician was very reliant on external validation, again, regardless of what was happening to your socialization as a kid. So we have created this system where we are very used to seeking external validation, right? Seeking reward, praise, recognition for the work that we're doing. And we've got an employer who, again, may or may not consciously be aware of this, but knows that there is sort of a magic point where they can have us hungry for that validation, but still thinking like we needed to work harder, that we need to see more people, that we need to code more complexity, that we need to, kind of get more, because physician billing is what brings money in, right? That is how money goes through the insurance system. Now, of course, if you are outside of the insurance system, the money flow is a little bit different, right? But most of us are in the insurance system, right? In order for our employers to get paid, in order to be able to pay us, right, we have to see a lot of people, we have to code a high complexity, right? We have to maximize those bills that get sent to the insurance company, and then the employer gets paid, right, and then pays us. There is a bliss point overlap here, right? Where there is this magic spot where we are feeling little bits of reward and praise, like, oh, you're such a great doctor. Oh, they can't, they really want to get in to see you because they don't want to see anybody else, right? There's all sorts of language that gets used. And oh, your patients really need you. And, because a patient need, like, don't you want to be there for your patient, right? There's this push and pull between a little bit of praise and tagging into the don't you want to be a good doctor sort of language there that keeps us not feeling like enough. And if we don't feel like we're enough, then we are going to do more, which then financially rewards the institution and usually doesn't change our bottom line. Depends a little bit on whether you're productivity based or not. But that drive for more income is not typically what works on us when we are being pushed in that spot. I think that explains, sort of this parallel between Bliss Point and this worth validation concept that keeps physicians working so hard, right? They can push that button of, oh, your patients need you. You're such a great doctor. You're so popular. We're really short-staffed. Oh, could you just, oh, the patient really needs. And I don't want to suggest, right, that that there isn't a real need, because there is a real need. There is a shortage. That shortage is not your fault, my friends. It is not your fault. And there's not always an easy answer there. And so much of that responsibility is not on you. It's not on you. Now it gets pushed onto you, but that's a different podcast. But we are sort of put into that spot of being made to think that we are the only answer to that patient's problem. And that's another podcast episode too. But you can see how this harms us, right? Because we are constantly working to feel like we are a good enough physician, and we are constantly getting a little bit of praise that keeps us going, right? A little bit of dopamine there that we are very dependent on, right? Because we are relying on that external validation from years and years and years of practice. And we get that little poke of, oh, the patient really needs you. Oh, this patient's on your panel, they're your responsibility. They really need this camp form filled out urgently, even though they signed up for camp 4 months ago. Where is this form? But again, different issue. You can tell that's something that sticks in my craw. I talk about that crap a lot. This cycle, my friends, contributes so much to our feelings of inadequacy. And I want you to see that there's external manipulation going on. Again, it may not be intentional in medicine the way that it is in the food industry, right? Where scientists are creating these highly craveable, highly desirable foods, knowing that they're harming us. I'd like to think that that's not quite happening in medicine, but man, does it feel like it. And I don't know what happens in closed doors. And I'm going to be honest, I don't want to be behind those closed doors. I want to be here talking to you, helping you to see this side of it so that you can say, holy crap, what is going on here? I can no longer allow my self-worth to be dictated by whether or not I feel like my employer thinks I'm doing a good job. I will no longer hold that up as the metric of whether I'm doing enough, whether I'm offering enough. I will no longer do that, because if I'm waiting for them to tell me I've done a good enough job, if I'm waiting for them to reward me in some way, to say, you're so amazing, we know you've been working so hard, here's a free 2-week vacation, and we'll take great care of your patients until you get back. None of that is going to happen. And even if it did, right? Let's say your employer said, you know what, you get to take a month off. You've been doing such a great job. Pandemic's been really hard. You've had, just a great attitude. You've been a great team player. Here is a month off. How would you be feeling when you came back if you didn't change your thinking? You'd still be in the same place, because it isn't actually the rest and time off that you need. It's that you are looking for worth and validation in the wrong place, because you have again been conditioned to look for it outside of yourself. We need to bring that that worth, that feeling of I'm worthy, I'm good enough. Stuart Smalley. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, right? We need to bring that into ourselves right now, not dependent on another certification, not dependent on Press Ganey scores or HEDIS metrics or any of that crap, right? We need to bring that into ourselves now and start to believe I am good enough as I am. I am hardworking, creative, smart, clever, caring, right? Whatever other adjectives you want to throw in there. My self-worth is not determined by what I do. It's not determined by my role as a physician. It's not determined by how many patients I see. It's not determined by how many sacrifices I make, by how many boundaries I refuse to put up, right? It's not dependent on how much of a doormat I am or how I make everyone around me happy. That does not dictate my worth. If we can start to really practice skills of self-compassion, of inner worthiness, right, of believing that we should be able to take real rest and real breaks despite all of the burden on us, right? That's necessary for us as humans, and it's completely appropriate, and it shouldn't depend on us having to finish an undoable amount of tasks. The worthiness feeling needs to come from inside, which means we need to change the thinking in our brain in order to help support our own sense of self-worth, right? We're going to throw the bliss point away. We're going to see it for what it is, as a businessy marketing profit generating tool that unfortunately is built into some of these major financial systems, right? The food industry, right? Billions of dollars, the healthcare industry, billions of dollars. That's not my bag. I don't want to solve that problem, but I do want to see how those industries are influencing my experience of my day, my week, my world, I will no longer couple my self-worth with them. And I want you to join me and start to see, where is this impacting you? How often are you waiting to feel like you've done a good enough job, waiting to hear something from someone else, from your employer, from your colleagues, from your patients, right? Waiting for this external validation, waiting for your family to say, gee, mom, you've done enough today. Why don't you take a break? Why don't you go on vacation and we'll take care of all the things? That's just not going to happen. Sounds lovely. Not going to happen. Um, we need to feel worthy. We need to feel validated. We need to decide that we are deserving of rest and self-care and fun and play and love and relationships, communication, right? All of those things. Join me in changing the way that you think, and therefore the way that you feel, and the way that you experience uh, this world of practicing in medicine and whatever it is else that you have on your plate. Ditch the bliss point. Embrace your own worthiness. Validate yourself, not because you've done enough to merit some award, but just because you are worthy right now as you are, just by virtue of being a human. You've got wonderful skills and capacities and special gifts to share. And when you are continuing to give away your sense of worth, you will not be able to fully realize those things that are wonderful about yourself. Let's let it go. My friends, until next week, please, please, please listen to this episode a few times, right? Really let it sort of sink into your bones. Check out my friend Rashmi Schramm's podcast, where we talked about this same issue from kind of a different angle. And I share a little bit, I don't know, probably a slightly different version of my story. Keep this idea in the front of your mind until it really starts to land. You are worthy, and your worth is not determined by how many patients you see, how many sacrifices you make, how many boundaries you lack. All right, I'm having a hard time wrapping this up, but until next week, take care.